Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining the UH Energy webinar series. My name is Ram Sitaram. I am a member of UH Energy and working in the hydrogen space and specifically on offshore green hydrogen. So I'm working on the supply side, and this is a very interesting talk on the demand side in terms of how hydrogen can be a viable alternative for mobility in the Houston area. The presenters are people that I work very closely with. Dr. Christine Economides, that I have written many proposals together with and have had the pleasure of knowing for many years, is a leading authority in this area. Alexander Economides is also a leading authority in the hydrogen space. I am going to look for my notes here. Give me a second, sorry, please. So let me introduce the speakers a little better here. Dr. Christine Economides is a professor and Hugh Roy and Lily Krantz Cullen Distinguished University Chair at the University of Houston. Prior to her current position, Dr. Economides taught at Texas A&M University for 10 years and worked 20 years for Schlumberger. While at A&M, she managed research and production and reservoir engineering in conventional and shale reservoirs and helped the petroleum engineering department to grow and evolve to a broader energy scope that she now leverages towards research related to the energy transition. And you'll see that reflected in the content of the webinar today. Dr. Economides was elected to the U.S. National Academy of Engineering in 2003 and was a member of the National Academy of Science Committee on America's Energy Future and the NRC Board on Energy and Environmental Systems, BEES. She chaired the Academies of Medicine, Engineering, and Science in Texas, TAMIS, which many of you are aware of. She chaired their Shale Task Force in 2017. She's currently a board member for QRI. She became an honorary member of the Society of Petroleum Engineers in 2018. Dr. Economides earned a Bachelor of Arts in Math and Science from Rice University, a Master of Science in Chemical Engineering from the University of Kansas, and a PhD in Petroleum Engineering from Stanford University. All of you, please welcome Dr. Economides. Paulo Liu is a research associate in the Petroleum Engineering Department at the University of Houston. Prior to his current position, Mr. Liu worked 23 years for Schlumberger in various roles and countries and interned at Texaco. He is a member of the Society of Petroleum Engineers and the Society of Exploration Geophysicists. He earned a Bachelor of Science from Texas A&M University and a Master of Science from the University of Texas at Austin, both of them in petroleum engineering. Mr. Alexander Economides serves as the Chief Executive Officer of Carebex Incorporated. Carebex is a global carbon credit issuance service and marketplace that specializes in the monetization of carbon credits derived from industrial and agricultural carbon dioxide capture, storage, and utilization related efforts. Mr. Economides was one of 3 co-founders of the company and has served as its CEO since the company's formation in 2021. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Economics with minors in Mathematics and French from the University of Houston. He also holds a Master of Economics and a Master of Business Administration, both from the University of Texas at Austin. So we have quite a qualified group of folks that have conducted this work and are ready to share with us. I will turn it over to our speaker here, and look forward to hearing a very interesting talk here.
So thank you, Dr. Kanides, Alex, Dr. Ram, University of Houston, Energy, and also the Department of Energy, Petroleum Engineering for the opportunity to present the white paper today. Next slide, please.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so the preference for liquid transportation fuels such as diesel and gasoline relate to its much greater energy density. However, the transportation energy sector accounts for 27% of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, and these are related to combustion of diesel and gasoline. Fuel cell electric vehicles refuel in 5 minutes and has the same transportation distance, similar to internal combustion engine vehicles or ICEVs. So I'll refer to fuel cell electric vehicles as FCEVs. The white paper compares hydrogen generation pathways, which I'll go into more detail. It shows that gaseous hydrogen should be competitive with gasoline and diesel for transportation in the greater Houston area. Moving on to the results, we use Department of Energy tools such as H2A from NREL and also H2SAM from Argonne National Laboratory to facilitate straightforward analyses. Grid hydrogen, and by grid hydrogen, we refer to as electrolysis, hydrogen generated with electrolysis from the Texas grid, using electricity from the Texas grid, is more expensive than methane-based generation options. Current tax credit incentives are helpful, but not necessary to make hydrogen fuels cost competitive. Because of the infrastructure in the Houston area and being able to repurpose any of the infrastructure, such as pipelines, roads, it is an ideal location for a gradual switch from liquid fuels to hydrogen. Industry in Houston, around Houston area, generate one of the largest amounts of hydrogen in the world. One of the results here you see is the SMRCC, which I'll go into more detail about what that means, is $6.10 per kilogram of hydrogen. And that relates to a gallon of gasoline equivalent of $3.04. For comparison purposes, we computed linear levelized cost, which culminates into the levelized total cost of hydrogen, as you see here. This includes the levelized cost of hydrogen, LCOH, the levelized cost of hydrogen transportation, LCT, and levelized cost of hydrogen associated with costs of refueling stations for consumer sales, or LCRS. These costs are related to independent companies performing these tasks. Now, these may be conservative because a vertically integrated company may be able to outperform these numbers that we will show. The levelized cost of hydrogen includes the levelized feedstock cost, the levelized capital cost, and the levelized operating and maintenance costs, which includes the fixed and variable costs. Hydrogen generation pathways are many, but we look at 5 of them. Steam methane reforming being the most common. Steam methane reform with carbon capture, or SMRCC. Grid hydrogen generation and electrolysis. On-site SMR and on-site electrolysis. The first 3 relate to hub type of hydrogen generation, which require transport of hydrogen to refueling stations. The 2 on-site ones are at or near refueling stations. Steam methane reforming uses methane as feedstock as well as water, and relax the methane with the steam, the water vapor, to form carbon monoxide and hydrogen. A shift step is happens where the carbon monoxide reacts with water to form carbon dioxide and additional hydrogen. Carbon dioxide for SMR is emitted to the atmosphere. Steam methane reformed with carbon capture seeks to capture the carbon dioxide and also maintain the methane in a manageable way. Grid hydrogen generation, or there are different types of technology. We looked at polymer electrolyte membranes, which is not an inefficient type of separation of hydrogen, using an anode cathode to separate the oxygen and hydrogen. And the on-site ones are basically, as I mentioned, near at or near the refueling stations. As I mentioned, there are different feedstocks for the different hydrogen generation pathways. The first is water. In the Houston area, there's abundant amounts of water resources. 450 million gallons per day are being treated by the city of Houston. The city of Houston has 1.2 billion gallons per day of water, surface water rights, 200 million gallons per day of groundwater supplies. Analysis shows that only 1.1% to 2.4% of these the Houston's total available daily water rights are required to generate hydrogen for every light-duty vehicle. We assumed about 5.5 million vehicles, light-duty vehicles, based on the registered vehicles. And for each of these requires 4 million kilograms of hydrogen per day to refuel, based on a refueling of 5 kilograms of hydrogen per week. Natural gas is of course abundant in the United States and also in the greater Houston area. You can see here on Zoom the visual. The natural gas is actually being transported throughout the United States via pipelines. Electricity, grid power for ERCOT, the current mix is about 30% low or zero emissions, carbon intensive. These include nuclear, wind, and solar. Natural gas is 42%, and coal is 19%, and other fuels is 1%. We use a value of $10.97 per 1,000 gallons for water costs. For electricity, we estimated at 7 cents per kilowatt hour. This is for industrial use. For natural gas, we looked at $3.32 per MMBtu, and this is the average for the first 3 months, as reported by the EIA in the Greater Houston area. Of 2026, first 3 months of 2023. As you can see, SMR, SMRCC, and on-site SMR is the lowest cost compared to electrolysis, non-site electrolysis. Electricity cost is much more as compared to the other. We did analysis where we arrived at about 222 kilowatt hour is required per day. And for SMR is about 6 kilowatt hour per day. The cost we used and the model we used actually for our inputs was used for a actual SMR facility that was built, and so our inputs were different than what the Department of Energy actually used, and we'll go into all the results as well. So for Argonne National Laboratory, we used HUSAM, which is the Hydrogen Delivery Scenario Analysis Model. This provided level costs for delivery and also refueling stations. The assumptions are, we're in the city of Houston, of course, population of approximately 6 million people. We're assuming that we're going to store the hydrogen in geological and gaseous form. At the refueling station, we're assuming 1,500 kilograms of hydrogen per day. Pipelines for transmission and distribution. We also looked at delivery by gaseous and the liquid trucks, but we are advocating for pipelines, and the reasons are what we will see as economical. It's more economical, but additionally, you have trucks in the beginning where you have to deliver the hydrogen. Eventually, pipelines will be the optimal way. So this is the one reason why we are advocating pipeline. Pipeline costs are much lower compared to compressed truck and liquid truck, even at 50 kilometers and 100 kilometers. The difference between 50 kilometers and 100 kilometers is about a penny for a pipeline. Compressed trucks is 12 cents, and for liquid trucks is 4 cents. For each of the transport options, we looked at the capital costs, O&M, and energy and fuel. So for pipeline and for compressed truck, liquid trucks, of course, is the trucks, the pipelines themselves. These are new builds. Repurposing may reduce the costs of transport for hydrogen via pipelines. But you see here the capital costs, the operation and maintenance costs, energy and fuel costs for each of the options. So these are three options. Again, it's pipelines. LAP has specific hydrogen pipelines already built that deliver hydrogen within the Gulf Coast area, the Greater Houston area. However, it's for industrial use, and there are no pipelines yet within the city of limits of Houston. This is just a photo of the liquid truck or gas trucks. Now, in 2007, Yang and Ogden did a study to look at the different variables for determining which option is the most economical and to transport hydrogen. So look at gas, liquid, and pipelines. As you can see, around 78,000 kilograms of hydrogen per day. The most economical is pipelines at any distance. So again, we require about 4 million kilograms of hydrogen per day. So as you can see, pipelines is the option, the optimal option for the city of Houston. So these are capital costs for consumer sales or the refueling stations. We looked at the capital costs for delivering by pipeline, compressed truck, or liquid trucks. Actually, for capital cost delivery by compressed trucks is lower than the other options. Operating costs for pipeline, compressed trucks, and liquid trucks are shown here as well. So for the capital costs and operating costs, we looked at the refueling station, which includes the dispenser, the compressor, the electrical equipment, and other equipment that's required for the refueling stations. Looking at carbon dioxide capture, the total equipment cost for SMRCC, you can see that the highest cost is capture. Capture cost is about 65% of the total incremental cost of $113.60 per ton of CO2. But we broke it down into CapEx, fixed and variable, operation and maintenance costs, the incremental cost for storage, transport cost, electricity, and water. This comes to, as I mentioned, $13.60 per ton of CO2, which equates to about $1.13 per kilogram of hydrogen.
Oh, right. Oh, right. Fantastic.
Cost specific and the type of storage, location, depth.
Yeah, that's not the key. Oh. Oh, okay. Okay.
Someone's mic is on. We can hear you throughout the presentation, sir.
Oh, right. Fantastic.
Hey, John, could you please mute yourself?
I think you guys can mute.
Yeah, you can mute them.
Yeah, sorry about that. I must have come off mute.
We are stopped because somebody's mic is on.
Am I on the right here?
This one? So sorry about that. So the National Petroleum Council, NPC, did a study and provided an average carbon dioxide storage cost per region of $7 per ton of CO2 in the Gulf Coast area. Comparatively, our storage cost was $16.30, about 38 cents, which is therefore maybe on the conservative side. Now, the benefits of any sellable products may offset these costs. So carbon capture and utilization storage, and what we're advocating is SMRCC hydrogen. And unit costs are usually higher offshore. Turning to the government tax credit impact, in 2022, the Inflation Reduction Act provided a production tax credit, PTC. Under the Internal Revenue Code, IRC, in section 45B. IRA also provided an increase in the 45Q to $85 per ton of carbon dioxide captured. And other increases as well. For the PTC, it's a base rate of 60 cents, but requires 0.45 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilogram hydrogen generated. If you're above that, if you're below from 2.5 to 4, you can get 20% of that, which is 12 cents. If you meet the requirements of wage requirements and also apprenticeship requirements, then you can have a 5-time multiplier, which then brings it to a maximum of $3. Comparatively to our SMRCC cost, it's much lower than that. But the emphasis here is that our numbers do not include the tax credits. However, if you are able to get the tax credits, of course, it will help the economics of the project. So again, no tax credits are included in these numbers. You see that total levelized cost of hydrogen is 91 cents for SMR. And on-site SMR is $1.42, comparatively to electrolysis, and on-site electrolysis is almost 4 times lower. Comparatively to a Department of Energy ATL 22 study, they found that SMR levelized cost of hydrogen is $1.06 per kilogram of hydrogen, and for SMRCC is $1.64 per kilogram of hydrogen. Using the same NREL tools, of course, our inputs were different. In the comparative study by Vickers and the Hydrogen Council, for grid hydrogen, assuming an electricity cost of 4 cents to 10 cents per kilowatt hour, a passive factor between 20 and 30%, system capex of $750 per kilowatt, and the system efficiency is 65%, lower heating value. The total cost range is between $4 and $6 per kilogram of hydrogen. So our estimation is within range compared to other studies. I'm forgetting something here. Right, we'll come back to the Q&A. The levelized total cost of hydrogen for various hydrogen generation pathways are shown here. Again, no tax credits is included in these numbers. You can see that on-site SMR is actually the lowest cost at $4.54. And this includes a refueling station, which consumes or actually is the largest part of the costs. Carbon dioxide and transport and storage is only included in SMRCC. Hydrogen delivery costs and hydrogen generation costs are also shown here. On-site SMR and on-site electrolysis, of course, do not include or has very low hydrogen delivery costs, so do not show on this graph. SMR, SMRCC, electrolysis, a high ECO type of solution will require hydrogen transport. So again, as mentioned, the refueling station cost is actually the highest cost of the levelized total cost of hydrogen. This is for SMR, and you can see it's about 60% as well, at $3.12 per kilogram of hydrogen. So this includes the storage, the refrigeration, the compression, the dispenser, electrical controls, and other costs. The cost of these components will decrease as technology improves, as well because of economies of scale. And you can see the hydrogen generation cost and hydrogen delivery costs as well here. Again, we are advocating pipelines for transmission and distribution, so you only see the costs for that here as well. For SMRCC, this is $6.10. The breakdown again, the refueling station takes up a chunk of the pie. Those costs can be reduced, I think, cost of hydrogen delivery can also be reduced. Turning to price equivalency. So this is a step-by-step guide on how we came up with the estimation. First, FCEVs are about 2.2 times as efficient on energy usage basis, and this is based on literature that we have. Hydrogen has an energy density of 120 megajoules per kilogram, while gasoline and diesel have 45.8 and 45.5 megajoules per kilogram, respectively. Gallon gasoline weighs 2.84 kilograms, and gallon diesel weighs 3.22 kilograms. So multiplying those numbers, you get diesel and gasoline holds 130 and 147 megajoules per gallon. Multiplying that by 2.2, dividing the 130, for example, for gasoline with 120, and then multiplying that by 2.2, the other way around, we get the customer breaks even paying about 2 times the price per gallon of gasoline and 1.8 times the price per gallon of diesel for a kilogram of hydrogen on a cost per distance travel basis. We want to note that these numbers are conservative relative to currently available vehicles. So let's say based on the equivalent pricing, we then get equivalent pricing of $2.47 for SMR, $3.04 for SMRCC, grid hydrogen is $4.40. Comparatively to gasoline, and this is the average of the first 3 months of 2023 in the Greater Houston area. We paid about $2.90 per gallon for regular. Consumer cost per mile, we looked at the average mileage from the EPA for internal combustion engine vehicles, and we broke out trucks only for fuel cell electric vehicles and battery electric vehicles, and we find that the average mileage is 67 miles per gallon per kilogram. A unit price of $6.10 per kilogram is a price per mileage lower than internal combustion engine vehicles of 9 cents. Battery electric vehicles is 2 cents per mile. Looking at emissions, we looked at the average mileage and the CO2 emissions for these categories, and FCEVs are on par with battery electric vehicles. And lower than internal combustion in the ICVs. However, we must note that SMRCC can be close to 0. Consumer preferences, we are accustomed to refueling in 5 minutes with internal combustion engine vehicles. We demand abundant, reliable, and affordable fuels. We may prefer access to hydrogen refueling stations like we do with gasoline and diesel. And we may appreciate the lower electric vehicle maintenance costs, having lower components as compared to ICEs. Battery electric vehicles take 30 minutes to recharge, and that's if you have access to superchargers. If you're living in an apartment building, you may not have that luxury to have a built-in recharger in your home. And most pretty. So conclusions, Department of Energy tools facilitate straightforward analysis. Grid hydrogen is considerably more expensive than methane-based generation options. The current tax incentives are helpful, but not necessary to make hydrogen fuel costs competitive. And Houston area infrastructure is ideal for a gradual switch from liquid fuel to hydrogen. Again, to emphasize that government support is not needed for hydrogen fuel switch for the Greater Houston area. Thank you very much, and turn it back to Dr. Adam.
Thank you, Paulo. Any questions?
Reiterate that they can ask through the chat too.
Yes, yeah, that's been mentioned in the chat. So, and I think we probably have a few questions here, so, but let's start with people in the room and then we'll switch over to the questions in the chat. There's about 4 or 5 questions in the chat.
So I have a question. Did you base your fueling on existing fuel stations that would do a conversion and add the hydrogen pumps in? Or was it a brand new hydrogen specific fueling station? Because then our land costs incorporated into that and building out and all of that.
Yeah, land costs are built in. We looked at specifically new builds non-repurposed. Of course, current, there's about 2,600 internal combustion engine gasoline stations in the Greater Houston area. If the owners of those were able to add, if they had the land to add additional hydrogen refueling station, hydrogen refueling pump, could be one option. If they don't, then new prospective business owners maybe want to purchase land and then
So that's where a lot of your
So
costs came through, then was a new
new
facility.
facility.
Yes, Alex, one quick thing, the price that's quoted in the models that we used is outrageous. It's $3.5 million per FCE refueling station. By comparison, a normal gasoline station is close to $700,000. Look, I mean, we have to use the numbers that are available. We're not gonna just invent numbers to make these look good, but it's not believable to me that that price would be sustained for any kind of real development in the hydrogen market.
Do you think there's a premium because this is like a new thing?
I would call it an outrageous premium, but yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
By the way, I should have pointed, that's Alexa Convenience, for those of you in the room.
Hi, Alex, nice to meet you.
And I'm sure you all know Christine, so.
Just on that cost with the hydrogen fueling station around here, does that include the pipeline or some form of storage at site?
So the refueling stations will be a full box effectively with the pumps, the compression required, on-site storage, and probably also a grocery store, kind of a building built into this costing. The actual pipelines that you would take to bring hydrogen to those stores is covered in the transportation section. So it's a separate cost item from the 312 that you just saw.
You wouldn't bring that hydrogen by road transport back to the neighborhood.
But we analyze those.
Yeah, we analyzed both, and we believe the long-term solution is pipeline, and the immediate solution is probably compressed truck, would be our guess.
Yeah.
And from, just to be clear, the difference is only a few times. It's not a massive difference on a short distance.
Yeah.
Like you would have.
Just you could put a hydrogen truck on the road and become bigger transit for a pipeline in now.
That's right, yeah. But in 5 years, maybe you do.
Well,
On your previous slide, we go back to compare the equivalent to gasoline, right, at 304. Is that assumption based on the local steam methane? Is that when you talk about the blocks, right? And one of your examples, right, was to have a small steam methane reforming, right, actually at the facility, right?
So but this number is not, it's the hub.
Okay.
So it's SMRCC, so SMR at the hub, and then, yeah, generation, and then you need to deliver that. But, yeah, so, but for the onsite room, I think it was, if you go back.
Because those costs are too different when you compare that, because you got a lot of additional transportation costs, but I guess if it wasn't for steam methane reforming this package option, you also have a lot of natural gas infrastructure, pipeline, et cetera, right, to get to that place.
Yeah.
That's right.
So one thing to mention about
C versus.
one thing to mention about that 610 number, that's got baked into it. You go and capture all the carbon that's emitted from the SMR facility, but it doesn't have baked into it that you get any advantage for doing so. There's no carbon credit sold in that version of the model. There's no PTC built in. So this is, industry decides to spend the money to do the carbon capture to have a completely net zero product and doesn't benefit from it at all. And we like that number because that's the one that absolutely kind of beats everything. Just from the perspective of, you know, if you care all about CO2 emissions, that's the only thing right now that solves all the problems.
Just to clarify though, you seem to be asking about SMRCC on site, which is not price here.
Yeah.
And that would require probably pipelining the CO2 away from the stations as well. So for now, we just didn't handle that.
But there are trucking solutions. There are isomodal trucks right now that could be used for that as well. It's a much more complicated system and beyond any scope of the study that we can do, because there's no real world analogs, even though it's definitely doable. There's not a real world analog that.
There's an on-site carbon dioxide capture technology, we'd be very interested in.
Yeah, for sure.
And you have to include the carbon capture and storage cost elements.
So that is included in the SMRCC.
That's on CC.
Yes, that's a comprehensive, the full package.
CO2 is in the ground and out of the way.
That's right.
Yeah.
I have a question on the water. You made the assumption that you have plentiful water here in Houston to produce your hydrogen.
It wasn't an assumption, it actually worked it.
Yeah, but do we really though?
Yes.
How come I got a water ban right now?
Yeah, so I live in the Woodlands, so I'm not in the Houston area, but I know in the Woodlands, we have specific days for a lot of water and you constantly hear about the drought, we hear about how Houston and other areas are all sinking because we're pulling the water out. So quickly, I kind of will question do we really have that much water to put into that system when Houston's growing at an exponential rate that has water consumption that needs to be used? It's like you're adding, and then when someone's going, there's no water.
Well, okay, so that's a fair question, but I mean, a fair response to that very fair question. By Houston's own numbers, we're talking about a 1%, 1 to 2% incremental usage. And that's with replacing 100% of the fuel requirements of Houston, right? So if we did 50%, it wouldn't be quite so much. And this is, by the way, just to be clear, that's not utilization. That's excess capacity according to the city of Houston itself. And yes, we are in a drought year, and yes, it may be worse today than it would under normal circumstances, but last year, you wouldn't even have questions. And I think next year, again, you won't have questions. Be my
So what do you do this year when it repeats itself?
I mean, that's a tough question. It's hypothetical. It's very difficult to answer. But I mean, realistically, this is not a major impact in terms of our requirements.
And we have a lot of questions online, so I want to get to that. One last question for around the room. Anyone?
I was just curious because it says water rights versus consumption. So understand that there's a certain number of acre feet, but is that what it's saying? It's to rights versus consumption?
Right, for the consumption, the 450 million gallons per day is close to consumption because that's being utilized by industrial plants and other manufacturing. So that's actually in Houston, that's the sector that uses the most.
It's how many gallons per day is needed to produce the hydrogen you're saying?
Oh, 2% of the 1.2 billion, about 1.4 billion. So about 140 million gallons.
Since it is a 45% increase in water consumption for the city of Houston.
No, I don't think that probably did.
Anyway, maybe take it offline, but it's just something, because there's always a difference of access of how much water you have rights to versus whether.
I think we took the 1.4.
Sorry,
billion.
but 1% of 1.2 billion.
1.4 billion.
Right, but that's not 100, that's tens, isn't
Should be 14.
it? 14.
14 million gallons per day.
Not 100.
Oh, 14 million.
Sorry. That's an order of magnitude.
Okay,
Yeah,
So the incrementally.
fair enough, it's on the spot, but.
Yeah.
But it's more like tens of millions, not hundreds.
So that should be about 5% increase.
Yeah, but
treated one.
But remind me also, Paulo, that 1% on the, if I remember correctly, we mentioned on this, on excess capacity.
Excess, yes.
So that's also, that's on the,
That's
that's,
taking on, come out.
it's not even coming out of the 450. You understand that, that's whatever's left over beyond the 450, that is 1% of that or 2% of that. Sorry, great. Yeah, so
Did you look at the opportunities in recent pool water?
you need to a certain level of purity in SMR, but that's a technical question you should be asking.
Let's move on. Let's move on. I really want to get to the online folks. Van Lee, you asked a question. Would you like to verbalize it, or do you want me to read it out loud?
So I have a few more questions. And so my first question was about the tax credit. So how would it differentiate itself from other alternative fuel vehicle? Because I experienced driving hydrogen car in California, and it's very inconvenient. So it gotta be something to compensate the inconvenience. the people who chose to be environmental friendly by using hydrogen car than other cars. So my first question was like, how do you calculate the government tax credit from purchasing or from using hydrogen car or vehicles in general?
Bring your slide back up.
Well, so that's an interesting question. So to my knowledge, and Paulo, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is no government tax credit incentive for the consumption of hydrogen. The tax credit incentive is for the production of hydrogen. The consumer, as you know, as an economist in the room, the consumer will typically benefit unless they're completely inelastic on their demand, when there's a subsidy involved from the government. So if you have up to a $3 subsidy, you would expect the consumer to share some of the benefit of that subsidy, but they would feel that in reduced cost of fuel rather than some direct payment from the US government. As for the other question, in terms dealing with, the inconvenience of driving a hydrogen vehicle in California, well, I mean, it's certainly a different animal if you start to replace all of the gas stations or have a large amount of gas stations in the city having hydrogen available as a fuel versus what's going on in California today, where it's, it's very small markets, serving a very small number of customers. There's not reason to have thousands of refueling stations in California like you might have in Houston with a full deployment, targeting, say, for example, 20, 30, or even 100% of the vehicles on the road. So that inconvenience it's temporary, and maybe not to be felt for very long if there is a real deployment of this technology here. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I try to touch on as much of it as possible.
Oh, yes. So you answer a part of it, and also about inconvenience that I mentioned earlier. So the thing is, it's not only about the limited number of hydrogen stations across the state of California, but it's also the frequency of the fuel station, is not working, so like after a certain times of charging, like refueling, it start charging, and if you're that unlucky person coming when it start charging, and it could be out for a whole day, or there's a lot of problems that you don't typically run into when you use regular gas stations or you charge your electric vehicles. For example, like if after you charge your car and if you forgot to take it out in a certain amount of time, it's gonna start freezing, and it could hurt your car or the station, that typical station, or yeah, pretty much. It's some of the examples that I could
Yes.
bring up, and it could cost the consumers time and effort, because you can drive to that gas station and it's far away, and then when you
Well-
get there, it's broken down. So
Thank you,
it's
Ann.
mhm.
So that's a different perspective on the consumer experience, which I'm not sure this particular study was not necessarily focused on that. It was more about the economics and the business case. But you bring up a very good point in terms of the acceptance of this will require the right kind of consumer experience, and you seem to have some good experience to share from based on the California aspect. So definitely something to take a look at. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey. Zach.
Let's get another question.
Yeah, that's exactly. So Zach, and I'm going in the order in which it was submitted, because I don't think we're gonna get to everything. There's 14 questions here. I'm not sure we can get to them. So just going on a first come, first serve basis. Zach, would you like to verbalize your question, or I'm happy to do it as well?
Hi, sure, I'm happy to verbalize it, and thank you, everyone. This has been really helpful information. But my question is there an assumed time frame that's kind of kind of being developed right now for how long it would take to implement the infrastructure and energy grid needed to support this as a common energy source for most consumers? Because I know for in Europe or in other parts of the world, these alternative energy sources, they're much more developed than they are here in the US. And I just wanted to know if this is something that could be developed over the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or I just kind of wanted to get a little bit more perspective on the time frame of the whole project.
Great question.
Sure. So, I'll do my best to answer that question, but some of it has to do with industry interests, which is always hard to gauge. How rapidly large companies might start looking at this, or entrepreneurs would take the opportunity. However, there's a few things that should be mentioned from a technology readiness level. Both on-site SMR and hub scale SMRs, electrolysis, all of these things are technologies that are decades old, maybe many decades old in some cases. The pipeline infrastructure is something that's being worked on. They are already able for sure to deliver hydrogen via pipeline, but they're improving a lot, including, from what I understand, some people here at the University of Houston are working on this trouble, that exact subject. The refueling stations, again, commercial technology readiness for sure. And the vehicles themselves are also at essentially commercial technology readiness right now, because every time you develop battery electric vehicle technologies, you are actually at the same time developing fuel cell electric vehicle technologies. Even GM people themselves have said, it's no trouble for them to switch production lines and start delivering more hydrogen and fuel cell vehicles. So the answer to your question is, with concerted effort from industry or entrepreneurs, very rapidly. But realistic time frame, could be 5, could be 10 years to really start looking at a full development. If someone decided they really wanted to do that in the city of Houston immediately, that's the kind of time frame we'll be talking about. But that has to take a concerted decision. I mean, you need industry, you need the energy industry behind it, you need the automobiles industry behind it, which they are, and you need public acceptance.
One major difference between Houston area and California is that the hydrogen generation is already here. California is getting their hydrogen for much longer distance.
Yeah. And one thing, by the way, about that, if there was any piece of this model that we presented today that's conservative in the sense that it's underpriced, is potentially the transportation piece. Hydrogen is extremely expensive to transport. And if you're talking about a few hundred miles, for example, by compressed, I actually think the numbers are higher than what Yang and were suggesting in their paper. My own study that I did independently of this was looking at more like $4, $5, $6 per kilogram. So you're getting hit with that in California, and you wouldn't necessarily have that problem here at least.
Okay, so I'm gonna change my approach to say, rather than first come, first serve, I'm gonna go for what are looking like interesting questions here, so I get to be the boss here. Is it safe and scalable, feasible in Houston and beyond? Don't want to be stuck somewhere with an electric car in Texas. So I think it's more about safety, scalability, and long distance is what I'm interpreting from the question. And that's from Hans Solo Go. Thank you for the question.
He wants to know if he can fuel up the
At
Millennium.
So
You got it now.
Safety kind of considerations tend to be a risk analysis question. These are things that can be improved over time by the vehicle manufacturers. I don't think that hydrogen vehicles are particularly unsafe relative to other options. So, it's not going to be, much worse, for example, than a battery electric vehicle or a gasoline engine, As for, how rapidly can you develop sufficient infrastructure to take long trips with hydrogen? Again, that kind of goes back to the earlier, answer that I gave, which depends on industry interest and the rapidity at which it starts to be adopted. We have looked at, it's a bit off topic for today, but a number of different development scenarios that would make sense to get you started and then eventually get you to where you need to be.
Okay. Uh,
I guess I'm afraid of like it blowing up. Like if there was a collision and there's a spark, the car just blows up, and then like, you know, everybody just dies. That was my concern. Like, where do they store I guess if I've seen a car where they store like little capsules, like the fuel cell or whatever in the trunk, and like you get rear-ended, now you're done.
Yeah, so currently the fuel cell leisure vehicles, they have a tank, which is it fits about 5 kilograms of hydrogen. And the commercial ones, there's actually three. One is discontinued, the Hyundai Insight, the Hyundai Nexa, which is like a small SUV, and there's a Toyota Mirai. So these cars have been around and tested, you know, in different markets. As you're refueling it, it's compressing the hydrogen up to 10,000 psi, which sounds a lot. However, these tanks are tested, they're bulletproof. So there's actually an interesting website where they actually show how hydrogen explodes from these tanks. And hydrogen is also very light. So actually, if there is a small leak, the hydrogen escapes the atmosphere very quickly, while other types of fuel actually lays around, which is actually more dangerous in the combustion. So compared to gasoline, it's not as dangerous.
Well, I think I would just say this is a better question for the vehicle manufacturers in any case.
And
We don't represent GM.
yeah, and I'm sure that these exact same questions came up with gasoline vehicles and they figured out how to make it safe. So I appreciate that comment, but I think it will be worked on. Moving on, Anna Dai, you had quite a few comments on here that talk. So if you could, speak to the comments that you have mentioned here.
Okay,
Floor is-
yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so to address some of the issues right now, so I'm in the hydrogen space. We're working on hydrogen fuel, not fuel cell vehicles, but the hydrogen station. So if anybody ever wants to like contact me or find me via LinkedIn, we actually are getting a station up, and then we have Toyota Mirais at Greentown Labs right now. And so if you want a tour to check out the cars, I would be happy to do that. Not to solicit or anything, just so that you guys understand that this is actually more safe and efficient than what we currently have going on. So we have to remember, like, gasoline had 100 years of like safety issues that happened. And so they became a safe, like, area, right? So the technology right now is only been out. So the Toyota Mirai has only been out for 8 years. And the way Toyota tested it is on the measures of Toyota Safe, right? So the way that hydrogen escapes, and I don't know if y'all saw a video, but if you do like a hydrogen compared to gas like flame, minus the power, there's a release valve. So all the hydrogen escapes upward away from the inside passengers of the car, and it escapes in 2 minutes. Whereas for an EV vehicle and a gasoline vehicle, it's constant fuel. So you can barely put out an EV fire, right? And so hydrogen, yes, has more power, and that's the potential of hydrogen. It's us harnessing more power, but the way it escapes and the properties of hydrogen go into the air way faster, and it doesn't produce a constant flame that can burn, like, you know, essentially burn a passenger alive because they're stuck in the car. And so that's the way that Toyota designed the car. There's also a lot of sensor technology. I can go into, if anybody wants to contact me later, I can go into why California like failed on their like hydrogen rollout, and why they're not experts on safety. They're experts on software. Houston is experts on compressed natural gas safety. Therefore, they're going to be experts on hydrogen. Another thing about the hydrogen vehicle, to address the cooling issue, it's the same thing, right? Like, so you have to cool hydrogen down to negative 40 degrees before you dispense it out, because it's opposite the JT effect, which is the Joule Thomson effect, which is so it's basically inverse, right? So as it expands, it gets hotter versus cooler, and so you have to cool it down before you go there. That all that takes is like a different material on the handle or the nozzle that goes in the car. That, with advancement in technology, will get this done. So in terms of product wise, these stations are all over in Europe already, and then there's also like more better working stations in Europe. And somebody did point out earlier, yeah. So one of the reasons why California stations are all down and it's really expensive is because they don't produce their own hydrogen, right? So if we already produce hydrogen, they're buying their hydrogen from Texas, and we don't have the pipelines from Texas to California that bring hydrogen over. So it's early in the game. So when you look at like how they're producing and what's going on, we're actually pretty like advanced in terms of technology for how early this stage is, right? And so if you can think of us tapping into all the hydrogen that's being made in the upcoming decade or so, if we have the technology already this advanced, in the next 10 years, we're going to advance it even further because there's going to be more money pouring into it. I don't know if that answered all your questions.
You give us a good perspective. There's no question that, and which is why the study focused on Houston.
Let's go for the contact in the chat.
Yeah, please, if you could put your contact information in the chat, we definitely want to carry on this conversation with you. Your perspectives are very useful.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
Anna. The next person I'd like to tap on is Austin Keys. You have some very interesting questions here on the technical aspects of it. So if you wouldn't mind verbalizing, or I can do it for you. Austin?
There we go. I think, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yeah, I was just looking at the slides, and I thought it was a great review. And would also look forward to looking at the slides after this as well. One thing that caught my eye is there was a comparison on, I think, the levelized cost of hydrogen versus, and comparing that to traditional fuels, and it was done on a mass basis. And yes, hydrogen is much more energy dense on a mass basis than traditional hydrocarbon, gasoline, diesel, for example. But it's not stored at the same density. And I was curious if the total amount of hydrogen that's stored at reasonable pressures, I know we've already mentioned, I think 10,000 PSI is what's traditionally used, whether that's coming into play in that cost as well, because I don't think we can get the same amount. I don't know if that same amount of total energy density is attainable with hydrogen as it is to traditional hydrocarbon fuels, plus the inefficiencies of internal combustion engine combustion versus a fuel cell. So just was wondering if that had been looked at.
Well, I would go for that one. If you guys are, you may be misunderstanding how we're doing this, but as Paolo mentioned, you're putting, for example, in number I, 5 kilograms of hydrogen, and it's going to take you 67 miles per kilogram. So you're going to get a lot of miles off of that. And all of the things you're asking about, yes, they are considered in the analysis you've heard.
With a side note that if you really want easy public adoption, you should be selling hydrogen by the half kilogram so that everyone immediately recognizes it's a number consistent on a per gallon basis. Just as an aside, as the business school guy. Pure marketing.
Thanks for the question, though.
Anything else, Austin?
I had asked a question later on in the chat. I don't know if you want to go in order. I can go ahead and ask it now.
No, I'm giving you the floor. So go ahead and ask the next.
Yeah, appreciate that. So the other observation was, it looked like, I think, was it $6 per ton of CO2 for storage, transportation and storage?
It was $16. Our numbers was $16 for storage, carbon dioxide. Yeah. And the MPC was $7 per ton of CO2.
Okay.
Just to be clear, though, that's not incorporating capture, that's not incorporating transportation. We do that elsewhere in the model. That is just, you know, I'm assuming you have the CO2 right there at the surface and you're pumping into the ground. It's going to cost you about $7 a ton to do so. You know, this is really more about the availability of storage volume in different regions and what it costs to inject the CO2 into the formations in those specific locations. So don't get confused. We're not suggesting that it's only gonna cost $7. That is just one piece of the total cost of the CO2 capture piece. The total cost was closer to 113. And it's on a difference. Yeah. 114, excuse me.
Yeah, some of these detailed kind of questions, we mentioned in the very beginning, a white paper, which we're hoping to finish for publication very soon. So anyone that's interested in that, they contact UH Energy and we'll make sure to let you know when the white paper is available.
That's a good idea. Okay, we'll stop it there. We're a couple of minutes beyond. So everybody, one big round of applause to the presenting. Wonderful job. So there will be a follow-up survey email. Please provide your feedback on the webinar. And we will also be keeping you in touch with you as the white paper is ready, and make sure that these slides will be. The slides will be available for you, but the white paper will also be made available to you. I want to say a big shout out to the UH Energy gang, Tim, Deidre, Ryan, and all of those, and Ed, May. Thank you all for making this happen. Wonderful event that has been very helpful to a large number of us. Want to mention that the upcoming event on October 19th is a symposium, the future of mobility promises and bottlenecks at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. So please be on the lookout for that. If you're interested in a mobility solution such as this topic today, that symposium will also be of great interest to you. So thank you all for joining. And once again, thank you UH Energy for putting on a wonderful show. Thank you to our hosts.
Let's say.
Good.